This week in business law, we are going to be talking about contract law. I want you to be aware that contract law is a very large part of business law. Entire 16-week courses are devoted to contract law. We are getting 1 week in an 8-week course. So there's no way that you can possibly know everything about contract law. This is kind of like a 40,000 feet looking down view. It is very simple as far as contract law goes, just kind of an overview. So the first thing I want to go into is what is the definition of a contract? And it's pretty simple, and it's agreement between two or more parties that is enforceable by law. Now, that last part of the definition is where all kinds of problems come in. So to be enforceable by law, there has to be 6 parts or 6 things that are in the contract. There has to be an offer, acceptance, genuine agreement, consideration, capacity, and legality. So we're going to go over each one of those separately. So the offer is literally just, hey, let's talk about getting a contract. It's an offer. It's the intent to enter into a contract. That's it. The acceptance is the agreement to be bound by the terms of the offer. So one party makes an offer. Hey, I'll buy this car for $10,000. The other party says, yes, I will sell you this car for $10,000. Now, there has to be genuine agreement. So if there's any kind of fraud or undue influence or any kind of malfeasance, if you will, it is not genuine agreement. So let's go back to the car thing. I've offered to buy a car for $10,000. The salesperson has agreed that he will sell me the car for $10,000. But if the salesperson knows that the engine is bad in that car and that they have done a quick fix that will last maybe 500 miles, you might be able to say that the salesman had fraud, that he knew something was wrong and he withheld that from me, so there wasn't genuine agreement. Again, lots of legal issues here. We're just going to do the very, very basic thing. So there has to be genuine agreement. Another way to think about it is if somebody's holding a gun to you and says, sign this contract, that is not genuine agreement. So the next part of a contract is consideration, a thing of value in exchange for another thing of value. I give you $10,000, you give me a car. So there has to be some kind of consideration. Lots of people kind of envision this as money. Something of value is money, but it doesn't necessarily have to be money. You can give somebody a place to stay in exchange for 40 hours of work. So if it's easier for you to think about this in terms of money, I get it, but consideration doesn't necessarily have to be money, so just keep that in mind. Capacity means that you must be mentally and legally able to enter into a contract. So if you're drugged, drunk, mentally handicapped, or below the age of 18, then typically you cannot enter into a contract. Now, there are all kinds of exceptions here. One of the things that voluntarily intoxicated, the law generally says that you can't get out of a contract by just pleading that you were drunk. So there's kind of a fine line here. The courts would have to decide whether you were so inebriated that you didn't know what you were doing. And also for being under 18. There are some contracts for like food that youth can be held to. If you're a 16-year-old and you go into a restaurant, there's an implied contract that they give you food and you pay for it. Just because you're 16 years old doesn't mean that you get out of that implied contract. So there are reasons why someone under 18 can be held to a contract, but they're kind of few and far between. The general rule is that you have to be mentally and legally able to enter into a contract. I have a friend whose brother is mentally ill and has been his entire life. He's not able to sign a lease for an apartment because he's not capable of understanding what that means. And that's really to prevent somebody from taking advantage of him rather than kind of a punishment for him. And the last part of what a contract has to have is legality. And if you stop and think about this, it actually makes sense. If you hire someone to kill another person and they do it and you don't give them the money, he cannot take you to court saying that you breached the contract, okay? Killing another person is illegal. So you're not going to be able to go to court and get that contract enforced. So illegal activity cannot be enforced by the courts. You go to someone, want to buy a dime of cocaine. You give him the money, you don't get the cocaine. Good luck getting that kind of contract enforced in the courts, okay? So just by common sense, you know that there has to be legality. You cannot enforce a contract for illegal activity. So there is an exception to this. There's always exceptions in the law. And that exception is called promissory estoppel. Big words. Let me tell you what it means and then we'll discuss this. Consideration need not be made if one party relied on the promise of another party and incurred damages because of the reliance on the promise. So let me give you an example to kind of make this make sense. And this is in your book, so you can read it if you'd like. Somebody has been offered a job. They live in Florida. The job is in California. They've turned down a job in Florida so that they can get this job in California. So he's been verbally offered the job. He sells his house in Florida. He has a bunch of expenses. He, hires the movers. He goes to California. He rents an apartment. 2 weeks before the job in California is supposed to start, the company says, we've decided to go a different way. So now the company in California has not given him any money. There's been no consideration made, but they did make a promise to him, and he is out significant amount of money based on a promise. So in that case, the person that is out the job that moved to California can go after the company in California for his losses that he has because he relied on the promise. Even though there was no money exchanged and there was technically no consideration, he can still go after them because he has damages as a result of a broken promise. So that is a pretty big legal theory in business law. A lot of cases go to court based on broken promises. And a lot of cases are argued that, well, we didn't give him any consideration. There was no money exchange, blah, 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 blah. So you can see how this particular theory can get really sticky. But it is something that you're going to need to know in contract law. So let's talk about breaches of contract. There are two types of breaches, material and minor. Material means that it's big, okay? There's something in the contract. Let's say that I gave you $10,000 for a 2020, think of something, Hyundai Elantra, okay? When I go to pick up the car, it's a 2015 Hyundai, I don't know, pick whatever, I don't even know what another Hyundai is, but it's not an Elantra and it's not the right year. That is a material breach of contract because I didn't get the car I signed for. Now, a minor breach is just that. It's not something that is huge and related to the contract. The typical kind of classic example is that I bought the car, I gave you $10,000, and I said I'll pick up the car next week. Well, I come up on Monday, and the car's not ready. Well, is that a breach of contract? I might say it's a minor breach of contract. Now, if it's that Saturday at 5 o'clock and it's not ready, it wasn't in writing. So it may be a breach of contract, but even if it is, it's probably just a minor breach in contract. So again, this is kind of where the courts step in. Is it a material breach? Is it a minor breach? Because, everybody has their own opinions on contracts. So this is one of those things where you end up in court a lot also. So the next thing that we want to talk about are the remedies to breaches in contract. Restitution. That simply means probably you pay. You make somebody whole. Rescission means that the contract, both parties, the contract is void. And typically this happens when somebody is mentally ill and tried to sign a contract, and the courts will step in and say, nope, contract is void on either side, so don't worry about it. Reformation is where the courts step in and reform, if you will, the contract. They make it equitable for both sides. And then finally, another remedy is specific performance. And this is where the courts will step in and say, you said you would do X. So let's say that it's a contract and you have a band, and the band was supposed to play Saturday at 9 p.m. and the band didn't show. Well, that's a material breach of contract, and the courts can say, as a specific performance, next Saturday at 9 p.m., you will play at this arena. Now, specific performance kind of gets a little, kind of blurry, because obviously you can't force someone to do something without pay, because basically that's slavery and that's against the U.S. Constitution. So you have to be careful on this specific performance. It is a remedy, but more than likely, most of the time, you're going to see restitution, be it somebody has to pay somebody because they breached the contract. So what I really want you to know from this chapter are the 6 things that make up a contract: material and minor breach of contract, and what the 4 remedies are for breach of contract. So I hope this helps. Talk to y'all later.